Why, hello.
Hello.
How's it going? How are you guys? Well, kind of okay? Cool. Welcome to the Greene Space. I'm Jennifer. I work here. Thanks for coming out in the rain. I just want to say that right off the top. Thank you. This is the first Soundcheck Live that we've done with an audience in the studio since March of 2020. So yeah. Very, very awesome. And that's just because we're lazy. I'm kidding. No, we've done tons of awesome stuff, but this is the first time we're back here with John Schaefer and an audience in the same room. Very, very, very psyched. Is anyone here for the first time? Wow. How did you guys hear about the show? Anyone? Sounds. New Sounds. Cool, cool. Okay. New Sounds is a great answer. Awesome. These are great answers. Well, thank you for coming. I'm really glad you're here. For all of the newcomers, the Greene Space is WNYC and WQXR's space for experiments. We do live journalism, we do music, we do theater, we make art. If you sign up for our newsletter, you will find out all about them, even when New Sounds or Gabe are not involved. And I recommend you do that. So come back, tell your people. For the old comers who have been coming to the Greene Space, any of you members of New York Public Radio by any chance? Okay, we got a couple. Everything we do here is supported by our members, also the Jerome L. Green Foundation, also Steinway for giving us this beautiful piano. So thank you to all of them. So this is not a spectator sport we have going on here tonight. I need you to do two things to be a part of the show. The first one is silence your phone if you haven't already done that. Crucial, we don't want those sounds. It's gonna feel good to block out the world. So get that going. And then the second thing is this show is being live streamed as video right now, I believe, as I'm talking. And it's going to be turned into an episode of Soundcheck. So we need you to be a part of that by, these microphones above you are on. So when you're happy and you know it, you're gonna clap your hands. You know, that's what you're gonna do. It's very simple. So when you're feeling the show, you wanna laugh, you wanna hoot, you wanna clap. please do that. Let people know how fun it is to be here for Soundcheck Live, not just in your earbuds, but in the studio here in the Greene Space. So you ready to do this? All right, so let's give it up for the host of Soundcheck and New Sounds, Mr. John Schaefer.
From newsounds.org and the studios of WNYC, I'm John Schaefer. Welcome to a very special edition of Soundcheck, our series of live performances and interviews. We are live in the Greene Space with a live audience, and it's so great to have people back here. Thank you all for being with us. And I am thrilled to welcome back to our studios the composer, vocalist, and multi-instrumentalist Gabriel Kahane, who first joined us over 15 years ago with his Craigslist leader, in which he actually set real-life posts from Craigslist to music. He has gone on to bigger and arguably better things, although I still have a soft spot in my heart for those early works. His most recent album is magnificent. It is called Magnificent Bird. There is a fascinating story behind it, which we'll get a chance to talk to Gabe about in a minute. But he's going to start us off the way the album begins, with a song called We Are the Saints, accompanied by a string quartet. Please welcome Gabriel Kahane.
These days of wandering, blood blindfold armory, I want to hold you close, oh comfort me. We'll glide down these crowded streets and see the kids who plead for something to love. If this is all there is, hashtags and genesis, and heads of state all made from paper mache, we're washing the eyelids of all kin. It's morning in America. I keep dreaming that I'm climbing up a dusty road to the top of a cold, clear mountain, guided by a voice on the radio. It says, your feet are the future, so keep on walking toward the little piles of broken stones, When silent spring began, it seemed God had a plan to strip the scales from the eyes of the shiftless, the shirt sleeve, the sundress, the new baptized witnesses. But watch how the emperor feeds his prey to keep the truth at bay. Now we're fighting over scraps again. We are the saints, we are the saints. We are the saints, we are. But in that dream I see a circle of light and hope, and strangers looking deep in the eyes of someone who thought they didn't know. They say, your feet are the future, so keep on walking toward the little piles of broken stones. Days of wandering, blood blindfold armory, I want to hold you close, oh comfort me. We'll glide down these empty streets and see the blue and green after the flood.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you.
That's called We Are the Saints, and it is the opening track on Gabriel Kahane's new record called Magnificent Bird, and a little bit of a different arrangement from what's on the record.
Yeah, the record is just me singing all the string parts, actually. and I think it's some electric guitar and piano, and my beloved engineer Joseph Lorge, who is my partner in crime, who mixed the record in LA. He likes to insinuate himself onto records by providing unsolicited overdubs. And there's like one analog synth note that he plays in the track. And I don't know if it's just like a weird perversion on his part, but I love it. So there's this one C that sort of like creeps in, and that's it.
Let's introduce the members of the string quartet, Chelsea Starbuck-Smith and Ravenna Lipchik are the two violins. Woo! Iona Kozasa playing the viola. And Caitlin Sullivan, the cello. All right, now, I alluded in introducing you that there's a story behind the record, Magnificent Bird. And in a nutshell, the story is you spent a year off the internet, living, it's not quite A.J. Jacobs' year of living biblically, but come on, for a 21st century guy, it's pretty close.
Yeah, I suppose I decided in the, I don't even know, am I supposed to look at you, or do I look vaguely?
Don't look at me, I'm hideous.
Okay. I'm going to look at this beautiful audience, this beautiful masked audience. That's with an accent grave on the E, masked. Let's see. We were talking about my year offline. Well, there were a number of things that sort of propelled me toward disengaging from digital spaces. But if I were to try to synopsize for the sake of narrative economy, I would probably say that I had come to the conclusion, one, that the internet was making it harder for us to love each other, and thus to build coalitions that can meaningfully change the material conditions of people's lives. And two, that I was super addicted to the internet and social media. I could give you a much longer answer, but that's sort of the short version. In the fourth month of my year offline, there was an event you may have heard about, a global pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
That coincided with my being in Portland, Oregon. We moved there abruptly. I bent the rules in some pretty slight ways, but I was militant. Otherwise, no email, no social media, no smartphone, no web browsing, except to do like 3 or 4 e-commerce things when everything was shut down. And then in the final month of my year offline, I wrote a song every day. And we'll be getting to that later, but I sort of feel like we should dwell a little bit on my internet addiction and the things I used to do on the internet.
Well, there are so many ironies just baked into this story.
True.
You, who wrote the Craigslist leader early in your, that was what made people say, "Who is this guy?" Troll.
Can we commit him to a mental institution now?
And you've continued with the Twitter-Kreis, or should I say Twitter-Kreis? Do you give it an echt German pronunciation? Or?
Do you know, John, are you familiar with the term Hobson-Jobsonist?
I know what a Hobson's choice is. I don't know what a Hobson...
This is going to blow your mind. In Garner's Modern English, 4th edition, which is an amazing just sea of delights for anyone who's a grammar nerd.
Is it online?
No, I don't think so. Maybe there's a digital edition. But anyway, Hobson-Jobsonism is when you're borrowing a word from, someone is nodding, and I'm impressed. Hobson-Jobsonism is when you borrow a word from another language and you accommodate the borrowed word with the phonemes of the borrowing language. So for example, if I'm at a bakery and I order a croissant, And the person behind the counter says, "It's a croissant." I say, no, I'm a Hobson Jobsonist. So anyway.
So you say Twitter
So I say
Christ.
Twitter Christ.
Okay.
That was a really long answer.
Yes,
Do you want
it was. Longer than any of the songs that make up the Twitter Christ.
Should I play one for you?
Can you?
Okay. I feel like this one is appropriate.
Let me hold this for
Okay,
you.
this is-
I assume I won't be holding it very long.
No, this is called Marxist Peanut Allergy for Robert Schumann.
Of course it is.
And this is a tweet I found online.
Is there anything more capitalist than a peanut with a top hat, cane, and monocle selling you other peanuts to eat?
As with the long ago Craigslist leader, there's something brilliant about that, you know? There's a thought behind that tweet.
There is a thought behind that tweet. Yeah, I think it's an extraordinary critique of late stage capitalism, wherein we basically kill people in order to make profit.
So that kind of lore of the internet, that's been with you all along. How hard was it to make that decision to cut it off, and especially 4 months in when the pandemic hit, to stay off, except to do the bare necessities to move your family to Portland?
Well, I will say it was much more difficult to return. Figuring out how to moderate in my return has been the real challenge. Being offline turned out to be pretty easy, and I want to just say for the record, I did not have someone like managing my social media accounts. They were dormant because it was not only about my mental health, but also this idea that I don't want to be complicit in people who like my music wasting the only time they have on the planet scrolling through feeds. I just think this is not only is it a poor use of their time, but it also makes companies like Meta more valuable. Every time you do this, and this, it
For the radio audience, this, and this was accompanied by hand gestures of swiping in various
yes,
directions.
And so I think that the sort of quixotic motive behind this is really kind of punching up at people who are legit famous and have millions of followers, and every time they engage in this kind of activity to get even more famous than they already are, they are, I would argue, having a deleterious impact on all of the people who admire them.
Mm. So you spent 12 months offline. The last month, all these songs come pouring out. Was it?
It was an
pent
exercise.
Up, or?
No, well, yes and no. It was. I had in the months leading up. You may recall fall of 2020. It was a somewhat chaotic time in America. Not that it's less chaotic now. It was a certain kind of chaos, and I kept trying to write these sort of epic, great American novel, but in song, and it was going terribly. And so just before the final month, October, began, I decided that I would write a song every day for the month of October. Turns out you can be wildly productive when you're not online. So I wrote 28 songs and 3 short piano pieces, and 10 of them are on this album.
This twice now that you said you wrote a song a day. Did you write them during the day, or did you write them at night? And I have a reason for asking this question.
I wrote them I would wake up every morning and I would write longhand in a notebook, and then when either my hand cramped or I felt like I had something, I would type up what I had written and then try to find some sense of music in it, move to the piano, and had to be done by 4 o'clock to look after my daughter.
Okay. I'm a little surprised to hear that, only because, especially with the next 2 songs you're going to play for us, they're kind of nocturnes, it seems.
Well, they're nocturnes, but they're sort of like nocturnes that cross over into early morning. Like
aubades, to use the French term.
I don't know what that word means.
An aubade is the morning version of a serenade. The serenade is an evening song. The aubade is an evening.
John Schaefer knows things, it turns out. He's been doing this for a while. Well, I think
I've kept that well hidden, yes.
Because I have a toddler, my mornings are early, so you you could be forgiven for mistaking a song that began at 5:30 in the morning for a nocturne.
So this next set, 3 songs, 2 of these sort of nocturnal pieces, and then really, as we can talk about in a few minutes, for me, one of the pivotal songs on the album called To Be American.
Yeah.
So let's once again hear Gabriel Kahane live in the Greene Space.
The papers spell fresh threads of doom, squinting to read in the dark of the bedroom. I hear the breath of my child, and ain't love the thing that's beguiled us for ages and still. The pages of newsprint can fill me with, what do you call that feeling, like spiders are crawling to your head. You wake up tangled in the bed, a dream, an explosion, the dead, survivors in black and blue and red. Last night we 3 went outside, looked at the harvest moon, hollow and high in the sky, where the satellites beam. The faces of men to our neighbor's TV screen. It's more information than I need. I fold up the paper, I'm done. Glide through the front hall, open the door, see the sun on the hazelnut tree. That's something I still believe. Oh, bleary pre-dawn Gothic, blue, black, and gray. Stumble, sleepwalk to the kitchen. Only this single ritual could start the day. Head bowed at the altar of this brackish liquid. Gather materials, filter, kettle, and herb. Boil the water, begin to pour. Go fetch the paper from the front step and learn that the country fears another civil war. Light starts to leak in through the antique window. Your wife and daughter are still asleep in bed. At the bottom of your mug is a map of Ohio. At the bottom of your heart is a map of your dread. Under a weird blue smokeless sky you drink up. Soon will be time to make another cup. One,
1, 2, 3.
To be American again, teenaged and certain of innocence. 6 lanes of Western caravan, burn fuel to speed up the Renaissance. Before the trench coats and the roped off rooms, the shell-shocked mothers and the TV crews, foreclosing a grand old dream, black motorcade running on empty, big box and a Ponzi scheme, drain everything, land of the plenty. In high school I sang in the choir with all the Mormons from Roanoke Park. Now all their houses are on fire, strange glow of ox blood in the dark. I think we all meant well, or so I thought. That season privilege was a parking spot, foreclosing a grand old dream, black motorcade running on empty, big box and a Ponzi scheme, drain everything, land of the plenty. If Reconstruction and the war seemed distant back in 11th grade, how quaint our simple lives before seem now in face of the coming days. Foreclosing a grand old dream, black motorcade running on empty, big box and a Ponzi scheme, trade everything, land of the plenty. Our furniture's on the street in every church, last rites are spoken. One criminal soft defeat can't change the fact that we're broken.
Gabriel Kahane with To Be American, before that Kennex, and before that Hazelnut Tree, all from the new album called Magnificent Bird. Live performances here at the Greene Space. And Gabe, I mentioned before that set that, for me at least, To Be American seems to be kind of the beating heart, not just of this project, but of the one that came before, the album Book of Travelers. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. And I think maybe my mic has gone. Has my mic gone dead?
Let's see.
Should I talk into this one instead? T2. Oh, it's back. We're back.
Okay.
Yes, Book of Travelers is a record that I made coming out of a 9,000-mile train trip around the continental U.S.
8,980 miles.
8,980 miles. Thank you.
Isn't that the original name of the project?
Yes,
8980
yes.
Book of Travelers?
John Schaefer, Actuary. Yes, I got on a train. I planned this 3 weeks in advance, that regardless of the outcome, I was going to get on a train.
Outcome of the election.
Yes, the outcome of the election, and take a train beginning the morning after that Wednesday. And of course, like much of the country, left and right, I was profoundly shocked. And I had routed this bizarre New York to Chicago to Portland to Los Angeles to Chicago to New Orleans back to New York. And I met some extraordinary people and was sort of at that time trying to break through the various mediating elements in our society that sort of sow the seeds of division to preserve power and profit. And it sounds super hallmarky, but what I found was that that when you sit face to face with people, we do in fact have more in common than we have that divides us. It may seem really, really head in the sand to say that at a moment like this, but I truly believe it. And they're just some evil, greedy people who are making us think that we hate each other. Anyway, I wrote a bunch of songs after some extraordinary conversations with people I met on the train.
Now, on the train, did you have your cell phone with you?
I did not. I like what you're doing here. That's a transition. Yes, I should also say that you know, having decided somewhat on a whim to leave my phone at home, I had my laptop, but I kept it on airplane mode, and I think that the extent to which that experience was transformative grew in part out of the fact that there was no refuge online. I had only the people that I was sharing meals with. I think there's also something kind of numinous about the Amtrak dining car, which sadly is being removed from a lot of trains for budgetary reasons. But you're just, you're sitting over pancakes and coffee looking out at this incredible landscape, and you just start talking.
Mm-hmm. So the point of Book of Travelers, as you've already said, is, the idea that we are a divided people is a very mediated idea. Mm-hmm. The idea in Magnificent Bird seems to be that same idea, which is writ large in Book of Travelers, brought down to an intimate, almost personal scale in this new record, in this new collection.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, I'm still sort of too close to the material to even understand what it is. Suffice it to say that I have realized that the album is really not about the internet at all. It's about reconciling, and maybe this is what you mean by division, reconciling the sort of mundane, the sort of quotidian mundane of our lives with the roiling chaos that's outside us. And I think particularly perhaps for people of a certain amount of cultural privilege or economic privilege. I mean, I was very stressed out about money throughout the pandemic. Nevertheless, globally, I think I'm a very, very fortunate person. And I think that lends a sort of cognitive dissonance of seeing so much horror around the world, and then you're making coffee. Right. And you're thinking, well, we might have civil war.
Right.
Or Vladimir Putin might set off a nuclear bomb.
So the idea that there are these kind of divisions within us, that seems to be the animating idea behind a lot of these songs.
Yes. Now I see what you're saying. Sorry, I'm a little slow sometimes. I'm also on tour and sleep deprived. It's very weird, I should also say, after 17 years in New York, to be on tour in New York City. It's
in your former hometown.
In my former hometown. It's very, very discomforting. But yeah, I mean, I think, I would say, thinking about my life on the internet before I took time off, there was this division between wanting to participate in that kind of performative, righteous anger online, which I think feels really authentic when you're in it. But I think when you take a step back, you begin to see that at the level at which Mark Zuckerberg and his henchmen are operating, all the stuff that we think we're doing for good is really just noise amidst algorithms that are making us hate each other. Sorry, was that too bleak?
It left me with very little to say, yeah. But, to come back to Book of Travelers, there's a kind of a hopefulness to this kind of, this project, this idea, if we can just disconnect from the echo chambers, right and left. And what is the internet except for multiple echo chambers?
Yeah, I mean, and I do not want to make the mistake of suggesting that this train trip was some sort of panacea. And I think it's also important to mention that, the ability to take this trip has a lot to do with what I look like. To be without a phone for 2 weeks as a man, that's something you can do without thinking. If you're a woman, probably not going to do that without some really careful consideration, among any number of other ways in which we could sort of problematize it. And I don't think that just getting on a train solves division in America. And there are real fundamental disagreements, but I think that those disagreements are maybe more cultural than they are ideological. Like, there is very strong support in this country for universal health care. There's very strong support for free college. But the cultural divisions have become so pronounced. And I think a lot of that has to do with mutual contempt. And I think that if we don't deal with the mutual contempt that exists across the political spectrum, and again, I don't mean to suggest sort of like both sidesism, it manifests in very different ways. But I think contempt is toxic wherever it comes from.
So many, I mean, I've found that enthusiasm is contagious.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, many emotions have that property, for better or worse. Now, we've been talking about Book of Travelers. This might be a good time to actually play some songs.
Let's do some songs, okay.
All right. Beginning with Beddecker, and then Baltimore and Little Love. Once again, Gabriel Kahane and the quartet.
Raise a black-heeled sky, put it up to the moon, shaking the sand from your mind. Dead of night, when you reach for the Beddecker, that leather-bound book from another time. Red line for railroad, black line for river, carving the country, sweet bread and liver. Maps that tell secrets, maps that run backward. Learn to be lost now, learn to be shattered. A dream, we don't feel right. On your knees in an open field, startled by silence you don't recognize. And white light on 1,000 lakes, like paths of glass that someone breaks, before the barefoot contortionist makes a grand debut. And blood lakes from the frozen moon, you think about the wound and wonder who will die. Amber, Nebraska, pink, Minnesota, mint green for Kansas, blue, North Dakota, red line for railroad, black line for river, carving the country, sweet bread and liver. got the news on the satellite phone. Jason, come home. Jason, dear, I heard it on the forest floor. 6 years of backcountry trails to the lake. Machete and snake, machete I learned to cradle in the old state park. Roosevelt 33, he had a plan for every young man. Give him an axe and a seed, give him a pack and a tree. Teach him to care for himself, give him fresh air for his health. Send money back to family, back to Baltimore. The tall boy convenience store, the indifferent, the endless war. And I know what that is, and I know what that is, and I don't need it anymore, but I have to go home. Luke was the son of some well-to-do folk. My family was broke, but we became friends. The parking lot, the chewed-up field. I started in the park just as he was going in. A hard 8 to 10 for selling to kids. My mama worked the county jail. And a Roosevelt's tree army under the sun. The work would be done while America bled by the greed of the rich. The boys planted trees and found God in the pitch. They found only sod in each fist. Why am I telling you this? Is it that I'm nervous to be going back to Baltimore? The tall boy convenience store, the indifferent, the endless war. And I know what that is, I know what that is. I don't need it anymore, but I have to go home. Luke, I guess, got himself into a fight. Took him to the infirmary later that night. Nothing serious, sure, but next morning he died. Then the satellite phone with the crew, which meant I didn't cry. I'm taking the train to take time for my thoughts. Pregnant with loss, preparing for all the things that maybe make you feel. I'll pay my respects and then I'll take a walk the neighborhood block, and then I will leave.
Some cheerful songs.
Silence had ambled down the coast. You drew in sand all the things we'd miss the most. Little love, little love, little love, little love, little love, little love. I hope we die here when we're old. We'll case the shore to record this holy place. white cliffs and starfish, the tide like ruin lace. Little love, little love, little love, little love, little love, little love. I hope we die here when we're old. Shrunken hands, twisted spines, and halting speech. We listen for the long gray silence to gather and increase. When it does, we'll close our eyes and rest in narrow peace. Little love, little love, little love, little love, little love, little love. I hope we die here when we're old. Little love, little love. I hope we die here when we're old.
A set of 3 songs there from Gabriel Kahane from his prior record called, well, that makes him sound like a criminal, does it? Yeah. Doesn't it? His prior record from his 2017 album 2018 album called Book of Travelers. We heard a trio of songs that began with Beddecker, then Baltimore, and then Little Love. And just to let you folks here in the Greene Space know, Gabe inserted Baltimore into the set tonight because he knows I love that song. There's several things about it. One is the kind of the widely spaced, lower and upper register. The other is a line that continues to strike me when I hear you sing it, and that is, I don't know why I'm telling you this. When we hear a song, we assume the songwriter has an intent, a reason for writing this, for giving us this narrative. Have you ever felt like you don't know why you're telling us this? Why this song is turning this way?
Well, this gets into that dangerous territory of songwriters talking about their lyrics, which I'm always, on the one hand, it's sort of fun to do, and on the other hand, you deprive the listener of making their own meaning. But I would just say in writing, whether we're writing from character or writing about ourselves, I think that one thing that I love about a lot of literature and that, poetry, and that maybe I'm trying to bring into songwriting, is this like slightly de-aestheticized approach to writing lyrics, that the sort of, I think Joni Mitchell is amazing at this, where the kinds of really prosaic things that end up landing like gems, just like, little tidbits of conversation. And I guess that in terms of like the pursuit of truth, I think about this also with playwrights I admire who have an incredible ear for speech, that we don't tell stories in a tidy way. And sometimes we do say, why am I telling you this? And that's part of the story, right?
So to come back to the current record, Magnificent Bird, it seems like there's almost a journalistic quality to some of the songwriting. And this is not new for you. I mean, Craigslist Leader, those were real posts by real people on Craigslist. While you were out in Portland, you did an orchestral piece called Emergency Shelter Intake Form, each movement based on a real question on an intake form for unhoused people who are seeking shelter for the night or longer. And there seems to be this kind of journalistic urge in a lot of... So how much of Magnificent Bird is sort of ripped from the pages of your life, of people that you know?
Well, I think it's a. This is such a cliche, but it is the most personal record that I've made in 10 years since Where Are the Arms, and I think that having spent really kind of 2012 to 2020 making work where I was really an observer or on the sidelines, whether it was February House, the musical that I wrote for the Public Theater, or The Ambassador, the study of Los Angeles, Book of Travelers, which I'm in there a little bit. I think in that first song, Beddecker, I'm sort of somewhere in there. And then, as you said, Emergency Shelter Intake Form was really a turn into kind of both art as social practice, but also a lot of immersive work of volunteering at a shelter, reading a lot of housing policy, tax policy, how we got into the mess that we're in. And whereas this record, I remember an ex-girlfriend of mine with whom I'm on good terms said to me after we had reconciled and we were talking about my work, she said, "You need to be more generous toward your feelings as an artist." And it was really, really profound, because I think that we can often be sort of dismissive of our own experience. I think particularly in a moment where we can sort of see suffering in a hierarchical way as opposed to holding multiple truths. And going back to the writing exercise of writing something every day, I think forced me to write about myself. So I don't think this album is, I think it is a departure from the journalistic mode that I'd been in for a while.
Okay. I mentioned earlier that very early on when we were talking about internet, not internet, that there is this various layers of irony baked in, and one of them is that this most personal of albums is actually an expression of community. Yeah.
So when I finished writing these songs, I guess it was October 31st, and then I began to demo them, and I knew that it was a companion piece to Book of Travelers, in as much as when I was on the train, I thought, I should do this for more than 2 weeks. I should really, absent myself from digital spaces for longer. And whereas, this was going to be a journey inward rather than the journey outward. And the initial instinct was to make another very, very intimate album of, just piano and maybe a few spare things here and there. But coming out of all of that solitude, people only wanted to talk on the phone so much, and that was the only way that I could talk to people. And I had, I had flown to Portland for work and then stayed there. So I had no physical community, and I just missed my friends. And so it was almost a ruse calling them to say, "Will you play on my album?" When what I was really saying was like, "Can we have a conversation?" And some of the people who play on this record are notoriously difficult to get a hold of, and I consider them friends. They're just busy people who aren't necessarily like the greatest communicators. But we all have people in our lives like that. We may be the person in our life like that. But there's not a single hired gun on the album. I think there's 16 or 17 musicians, and they're all people who I love really, really dearly. Some I know better than others. But it was really, in some ways making a record alone, not being a great engineer and just getting my studio set up in Portland was really painful. Singing by myself, comping my own vocals was awful. But getting to connect with my friends and to sort of use the internet in such a way as to connect with one person at a time. And I would sort of hold on that just in the sense that I think I distinguish between uses of technology to try to communicate at scale, which I think is really seductive, but often leads to bad things happening, as opposed to using the internet to keep in touch with relatives or dear friends who live across the country, which leads in nicely to the next song.
Right. So Linda and Stuart is the name of this next song, and this is from Magnificent Bird. And here's Gabriel Kahane with 4 new members of his community playing live at the Greene Space.
Linda and Stuart, trapped in their apartment, 79th and Madison, the one that they bought 50 years ago. No fancy lobby, no Baroque fresco. The delivery men in their light blue surgical mask knock twice, leave groceries double bagged to the door, then cross the street back to the shop, to the basement below. Last week I called and asked, how's your relative's stock of despair today? Linda replied, St. Gabriel, I know I really shouldn't complain, but each month this persists as one that we're not getting back, for we've little time left on this spinning marble. The point of view I can't dismiss, and what is there to say in fact, so I'm left with hollow platitudes to mumble. Straining to hear a few bars of the Upper East Side, I find I've not allowed myself, I haven't really had the time to miss New York, the freak show light. That universe of regret that I keep locked in a wooden box, with all the other thoughts and self-pity. Maybe sometime yet I'll hop a plane and catch a taxi downtown, just to hear the sound of the old city. Sirens in the subway and the slurred words of the shirt-sleeved men on the town to toast the close of a deal. We shuttered the last factory in every town in Michigan where the union boys are stone-faced at the wheel. Tells me she's taken a writing class on the art of the short story, and I say, hey, that's great, cause we all need a way to make sense of the world. We all need a way to make sense of the world. We all need a way to make sense of the world.
Thank you so much.
Glossy monthly magazine with lush ads hawking luxury, read about a young woman, it got me down. It described her songs as sorcery, troubled childhood transformed to be magnificent rare birds of sound. And I felt the pains of pettiness and jealousy swell in my chest. How easy to forget you're already blessed. Envy makes me feel ashamed. I suppose that's why I stepped away for a year, clear of the scroll. A pick-line drip of glowing hearts, righteousness and shopping carts, as if it could ever make us whole. And when my friends call and tell me that it's worse than before, friendly fire and hungry for more, I don't know what to say. Those feelings in a drawer, swallowed the key and locked the door, and walked right out of the room. I put that Rare Birds record on, I tried my best to sing along. The words were unfamiliar, but I could carry the tune. 1, 2, 3, 4. Basement engineer, inventor. If this free speech he believes truth will prevail, blind to the movements of the emperor. In his palace made of glass he thumbs the scale. Watch his dead eyes open as the rats come to feed. Angry words are spoken. Someday someone's gonna bleed. This time I'm listening on the radio. The explosion, even on speakers, rattles my ribcage. There are screams, chaotic shouts, voices I think I know, or maybe I don't. And then silence. This is the new age of anxiety. This is the new age of anxiety. If I am a camera, I see 3 starfish in the bed. One of us dreaming, one of us too young to have learned to dream in red. Jump cut to a wide shot of the sky. 300 million fists clenched tight. All these months I've slept with a pencil tied onto my finger, thinking that it might bring me peace. But instead I find I'm left with these photographs that only linger after I write down what I've seen. After the silence, a change of scene. I'm in some kind of safe house, having my head shaved, being trained as an assassin. I think these images must spring from the vault of action movies I have stockpiled on sleepless nights, on transatlantic flights over the ocean. For tours, a relic of an earlier age, when we sat in airport lounges drinking scotch, eating pretzels, watching cable news, oblivious to the mess that I was making for you.
Once again, Gabriel Kahane and the quartet. Another set of songs from Magnificent Bird. I want to just credit the string players again, Chelsea Starbuck-Smith and Ravenna Lipchik playing the violins. Ayane Kozasa playing the viola. Caitlin Sullivan the cello. And of course, Gabriel Kahane playing piano, a little bit of guitar. So you started that set with Linda and Stuart, and then in short order, we heard the title track, Magnificent Bird, Basement Engineer, and finally, Die Traumdeutung.
Nice pronunciation.
The
No Hobson Jobsonism there.
the dream meaning, or dream interpretation.
Interpretation of dreams, yeah.
Not the first time you've used German in titles. I mean, we mentioned the Craigslist Lieder, German for art songs, the Twitter Kreis, a kind of a song cycle. What's the significance of making that title a German title, if any?
I honestly don't know. I mean,
you don't know why you're telling us this, is what you're saying.
No, well, I mean, it's obviously a song about a recurring dream, and I guess I thought it actually feels less pretentious to call it Die Traumdeutung than it does to call it the interpretation of dreams in English. And I couldn't come up with a better title. And I think it's a beautiful sounding word. And I recently got my German passport just before the pandemic. My grandmother, not the grandmother I'm about to sing about, my other grandmother, who fled Germany in 1939 as a presence on Book of Travelers. And because of German law, I was able to get German citizenship, and I obviously feel a deep connection to German music. It's all over my harmony.
Right. And the short peanut piece
right.
dedicated to Robert Schumann.
Yeah. Well,
wonder what he would make of that.
I don't know.
What is this peanut song? The arrangements for string quartet, these are your arrangements.
Yeah.
So, you clearly move. Are you aware of moving from a kind of a pop music world into a kind of classical music world, or are distinctions like that just kind of meaningless at this point?
I think they're pretty meaningless at this point. I think there's now a generation younger than I am for whom the idea of living both in the world of vernacular music and concert music, it's just not really a distinction. I think what I would say is that the songwriting that I do is not really considered pop by anyone except maybe you and me. and more and more I hear people saying, "Oh, it's so nice that you make art music that's so accessible." Whereas I'm thinking, I'm making pop music that's deranged. And so I do think that, institutionally, it's really lovely that there are places like Georgia Tech and the University of Washington and Stanford, which actually effectively commissioned Magnificent Bird. I told them that I was going to go on this wild inquiry of being off the internet, and without their support, I don't think I would have been able to. Those commissioning funds were what kind of got me through the pandemic, and allowed me to say, "Oh, I'm going to write a song every day," not knowing that was going to be the piece.
Right.
But that turned out to be the piece, and so I think increasingly people who are like me, who write sort of more out there music that is very much rooted in a kind of song tradition and song structure, and sort of pushing against the limits of it. We're having to look for new ways of sustaining ourselves, because the commercial music scene ain't it.
Well, I mean, even in the commercial scene, unless you are in that top 10th of the top 1%.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody is trying to figure out how do I do this?
Yeah. I mean, and I would be remiss not to give a shout out to my label, Nonesuch, for having put out these last 2 records, which, the last album has been sort of a grower. Like it continues to find new listeners in a very kind of slow, steady way. And I think that probably will be the rest of my career, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah. You mentioned you had 2 grandmas, like most people, one of whom was a character in Book of Travelers, and the other of whom is the subject of the final song on the album and on the show tonight. So
yeah, we're going to do for you Sit Shiva, and I would sort of send this off to all of those who've lost someone during these last 2 years. And if somehow you have not lost anyone in the last 2 years, I don't know what you were doing, but it's been a time of losses, communal, private, public, grand and small. And I guess I should probably put my capo on my guitar. And it's been lovely to see all of you. Thank you for being here. Thanks to the 4 of you for being a part of my community, and to all of you for being part of my community.
Gabriel Kahane with Sit Shiva.
Now I understand what you were doing. You were just being very courteous. And that's probably a little low, but that's okay. And do y'all need a note? You're good?
We're good.
I'm just stalling. I'm trying to cover the fact that I'm putting a capo on. It's, all this time of not being on tour, we've forgotten there's a course you take in music school on, strategies for sending attention away from the fact that you're awkwardly putting a capo on your guitar. But it's now been 20 years since I took that class, and so I'm a little rusty in that department. I'm just going to see if I can raise this slightly. This is the other class you have to take, is mic stand techniques, graduate level course. Okay. The song is called Sit Shiva.
My mother, describing her mother, fought back tears. It's weird, I thought the intimacy of seeing someone try not to cry in a close-up on the screen. Cousin Lincoln told a story about the PA tie. They saw at the Metropolitan Museum, and after a silence of some time, Grandma turned to him and said, "You know, I think of myself as a Jew, but I really love Jesus." We sit cross-legged on the edge of the bed, leaning into the laptop to hear what's just been said, in the manner of a modern family honoring the dead. Aunt Susan in a one-room schoolhouse sang Grandma's favorite songs, simple hymns of love and loss. And though her connection was unstable, she was able to get her message more or less across. We sit cross-legged on the edge of the bed, leaning into the laptop to hear what's just been said in the manner of a modern family honoring the dead. At the end of the afternoon, Grandma's grief-shattered husband she'd met in the fall of 1939, a milkshake at the Automat in Morningside Heights, before he was shipped off to Europe to fight. 50 years, not a word, not a sight, till the touch-tone phone rang in 1995. Raymond, it's Judith, my husband has died. Back to New York and they gave it a try, and the photographs of great-grandchildren multiplied. These two ancient lovers walking side by side, his body ravaged and hers turned to light. He raised his hand to speak at last, and everyone held their breath or gasped as he said, "Goodbye, my darling, goodbye."
Thank you so much.
Gabriel Kahane and the string quartet with Sit Shiva. The album is called Magnificent Bird. It is out now. My thanks to the Greene Space crew, our technical director, Irene Trudell, and thank you for joining us tonight here in the Greene Space. I'm John Schaefer. Good night.